I took my mind off the pain by reminding myself I'd be exactly 2 inches closer to the stars.
You all right?
Yeah. You want to go dancing?
Do you love dystopic science fiction? Warnings of the consequences of our hubris? Do you ache for the most masculine story you never thought about until it hits you with a ton of bricks?
What the?
Did you never in a million years think watching a man take a piss test would make you weep as much as you did for the birth of your new child? How about a future where everyone looks like the love child of a 60s beatnik and an 80s yuppie? Do you yearn for these timeless stories? Stories of the issues of today wrapped up in tomorrow, a movie that makes you remember what it means to be a man with, at most, 3 punches thrown and no gratuitous nudity? Well, I have the movie for you. In the age of the last Hollywood golden age, work of someone you never heard of, but hasn't missed in 20 years, brings you the greatest sci-fi dramatic thriller that you've ever seen. You don't even like this genre, but you love this movie more than your wife. It's the story of human potential.
Yours just happens to be an exceptional example. I don't know why my folks didn't order one like that for me.
It's a movie of overcoming the odds.
You know you're gonna lose.
It's a movie of inspiring others. It's 1984, where the good guys win. It's Gattaca, 1997.
I told you I don't watch new movies anymore. I wish I could say it's because movies aren't a smart medium, but I can't. I wish I could say it's because movies don't inspire you, but they do. And I wish I could say it's because there's no practical effects, but who cares? One day, they just released a movie, and it was awesome. The director wrote it himself. He had no IP, no big marketing, just here's 106 minutes of human potential, and dumped it into your face like the Stooges with a cream pie at a fancy dinner party. Most sci-fi focuses on lasers, on fancy technology, on robots, or special effects. This one actually fucks where it matters. The story and the characters. Like, each piece of science in this science fiction story moves the story forward. There's zero technobabble, there's zero fat, there's zero autism, zero communism, just pure, unadulterated, kick in your head by a mule level awesomeness. And the only thing this movie did wrong was to make you tear up so you can't watch it with your bros because they're going to laugh at you for being a sissy. Or they would, if they weren't pretending they also have allergies. So what's Gattaca? Gattaca is what pure science fiction was supposed to be. The problems of today wrapped up into the setting of tomorrow. It's not about impressing you with fancy lights, but of showing you topics that are absolutely taboo, in just enough of an abstraction that you can get through to people. It's not about a man trying to go to space, or a murder in the Gattaca Science Corporation, or a love story, or showing off genetic science knowledge, but of the fallibility and the religion of science, the identity of gifted that holds humanity back, and human potential. It's like every good film. Animal Farm, not about the animals, but of the fear of communism coming to Britain. Godzilla wasn't about monsters, but of nuclear power and the fear of annihilation. And Clockwork Orange wasn't about cool criminals and drug milk, but of the fear of implementing behavioral psychology on civilization. It was written by Andrew Niccol. You've never heard of them before this. He did commercials and then one day just wanted to make a movie. He wrote The Truman Show, but it would have cost way too much to trust a first-time director, so he wrote and directed Gattaca to show he knew what he was doing, and boy oh boy did he. He follows in the same vein as all the other filmmakers I've talked about on this channel, working people who created greatness. Now, since we don't have DVD sales and movie budgets have CGI bloat, which make them comparable to a small country's GDP, we don't have the opportunity to see the talented everyman make an amazing and simple work. Plus, it's an underrated skill, competence. And that's a few reasons why these sort of movies, they're never coming back. So if you've watched any other videos from this channel, you're noticing a pattern. The best films that we've never watched weren't made by the greatest and the most famous out there, but of working people with vision, with talent, with skill, people from all over the world, with all types of experiences, creating some of the best work of a generation. This guy was Gen X. The boomers took all the gifts from the greatest generation and hoarded it for themselves. Gen X was forced to fend for the economic scraps. This made them a plucky upstart who had to work twice as hard for half as much. And if you don't think that being overshadowed and sidelined by the baby boomers was an important skill, just look at what millennials are pumping out nowadays. The Breakfast Club generation looked at the American Pie generation and told them, I'm going to eat your lunch. So when you watch this movie, I beg you, begging you, put your fucking phone down. Give it your full attention. Let yourself get lost in the moment to moment to moment. I guarantee you that you're going to be glad you did. It's 106 minutes that TikTok and Twitter will never compare to. There's actually a lot of characters in this movie, but the main ones are Vincent, Jerome, Irene, Director Joseph, Dr. Lamar, and Detective Anton. Look, I'm going to be real with you. I hate movie reviews on YouTube. Theater kids, commie wannabe philosophy students love to talk about movies either as a science fiction spectacle or some communist babble, but this movie is so good that even they haven't ruined it on YouTube yet. Instead, it's, some philosophy students who wanted an excuse to babble about Nietzsche. I still hate movie reviews on YouTube, but these are the least worst ones so far. But it cuts to the core of why I hate them. No one watches movies on the movie's terms. They always have to use movies as some sort of personal journey and force feed it into whatever navel-gazing BS they learned in university. Gattaca isn't the journey into you learning how to hate your dad. It's a specific movie with a specific series of moral messages. Take from it what you want, but if you can't view it other than through the lens of your own narcissism, you're not enjoying the movie, you're enjoying yourself. And no offense, but if you're not as interesting as Jude Law with those dreamy eyes and those soft accent and those lips, and Uma Thurman was a baddie, shut up. This movie needed gratuitous nudity. So what's the theme of Gattaca? It's got a few, but the main one is an appreciation for the unquantifiable human spirit, grit. You can't be measured, you can't be perfected, you will always exceed expectations for the grit that you have inside of you. It also shows that utopia is actually dystopic. That discrimination prevents merit, that science is becoming a religion, and that identity is more than who you are, but what you do. And it does it in the most relatable way imaginable. There's like a piss test throughout the movie, a symbol of the dystopic genetic discrimination of the world. Vincent has to work diligently to fool it throughout the movie.
What about the interview?
That was it.
Now, I'm not going to spoil it. This comes later in the video, but at the end, it sets up one of the most satisfying twists of the movie and its themes. It'll make you cry. They are complex, they are layered, and they are intertwined themes. They play out in the symbolism. They play out in the characters. And they play out in the plot in such a way that you really have to think about it after you watch the movie. People who write movies like this nowadays would just make Vincent a trans, lesbian, woman of color, everybody else a stupid racist, and the communist technical utopia was actually a very good thing while wandering through a convoluted first draft of a plot while the lesson is, don't sweat it, everybody will bend over backwards to help you succeed in spite of yourself. Vincent, aka Jerome, is the protagonist. He's established in a world of bougie genetic designer people and parental neuroticism. In an effort to be true to their faith, they decide against genetically altering him in utero. The doctor declares him dead by like 35 of a heart condition on his birth. His parents are so ashamed for their decision that they don't even give him the father's name. Instead of Anton, it's Vincent. They focus all their efforts on their second child, Anton, belittling Vincent's dreams to be an astronaut. Classic aspirational occupation. Vincent learns that his parents were right and he's unable to hold any job but as a janitor in the space station. So he has to decide how bad he wants it by buying a new DNA on the black market and hiding his identity throughout the movie. He has to work 10 times as hard as everybody else, but manages to fool everyone by being chosen for the next trip to Titan. Small aside, the best part of this to show his resolve is when he actually gets like the leg enhancing surgery, which you've seen things online about that now, and it's pretty crazy. But yeah, that's how bad he wants it. He's willing to add 2 inches to his body for that. So as it progresses, a coincidental murder at the facility and his newest interest in Irene make it more difficult to conceal his identity and test his resolve. In the end, he inspires everybody around him to ignore the striver's need for genetic perfection and becomes a symbol for everybody. A symbol for the indomitable human spirit. In a way, it's similar to Dark Angel, I Come in Peace, in that the character is a larger-than-life character, that his own personal story isn't really the character arc, but it's more so everybody else around him gets the character arc and he enables it. I'll expand on this later, but Vincent has a want and a need. He wants to go to space, and he needs to know he's not alone. If that doesn't make sense now, it will soon through the other characters. Jerome is genetic perfection of this world. He is the best of the best. He is the top tier, but he was in an accident, put into a wheelchair. Jerome represents the pinnacle of the dystopia. Perfect, but crippled. He's cold and distant to Vincent, only accepting him because he has to maintain his lifestyle, just like the space agency has to accept him as a janitor. As the show progresses, he starts to root for Vincent. He sees someone who by all measures should be a failure, but not only is he succeeding, but he's excelling. And then Jerome reaches his lowest point in the story when he reveals that the reason he was put into that wheelchair wasn't an accident. He had a silver Olympic medal that he had throughout the film. He walked into traffic because even though he did his best, Jerome Morrow was never meant for second place. He believed in the system, and the system crushed him. That revelation is his lowest point, which is an interesting choice since it happens well before the movie even starts. But afterwards, he's kind of given hope for the human spirit by seeing Vincent taking his genetics and his tenacity and driving it forward. It drives the character to his pinnacle when he has to protect Vincent from the police, who think he's guilty of murder, and on a moment of drunken honesty tells Vincent he's proud of him, using his real name to drive it home. Once everything's been resolved and Vincent is getting ready for his last day before flying into Titan, Jerome leaves him a lifetime supply of genetic material, admits that he got the better end of the deal.
I got the better end of the deal. I only lent you my body. You lent me your dream.
Then Jerome hands Vincent an envelope containing a lock of hair to be opened when he's in space, and then he takes his own journey with his second place medal. It's a fucking tearjerker, man. Irene, Anton, and Dr. Lamar are the same arc but told in different ways. Irene, neurotic about her genetic failure. She's the lowest person on the totem pole, a lot of self-worth issues, a heart condition, and she knows she's not good enough. Dr. Lamar is a father who has a son, like Vincent, who isn't good enough to make it into Gattaca. Anton, prior to the reveal, is somebody who cannot believe that an invalid like Vincent is able to do any of this, but is compelled to find him anyways, even when he finds out that he had nothing to do with the murders. So they are elements of the system. They are the product of the system. They are the output of the system, and through their interactions with Vincent, learn that they don't have to be bound by the system. Irene noticed Vincent's different. He actually seems to care about not fitting into the faceless, darkless, emotionless co-worker world that he has. Irene steals some genetic material from his desk, making you worry if it's actually Vincent's or Jerome's planted DNA. She finds out genetically perfect. She starts her journey by swallowing her ego and offering a lock of hair to Vincent in hopes that she can get a date. Vincent drops it to show that genes don't matter and he doesn't care. He has a series of dates and adventures exposed to violence, risking Vincent's life, and eventually finds out that her world is a lie. So by the end, she reaches her character arc by realizing she doesn't have to be limited by her genetics. And then Dr. Lamar, he's one of those guys, he's always testing Vincent in a series of piss tests, which are actually ID scanning. He brings up stories of his son throughout, how he's genetically inferior and he has no hope, and his pinnacle comes at the end of the story when he actually falsifies a drug test that Vincent wasn't ready for. He acknowledges he knew the entire time, but because he wants his son to succeed in the world that Vincent gave to him as a possibility, like he gave to Jerome, he got the dreams for his children. Anton turns out to be the alienated brother of Vincent, and this whole time he couldn't accept that his brother could have accomplished more than he did. Everybody in his life told him that he would be the best, so when he's there to investigate the murder, he's really there to answer the question of, how can he be better than me when I have all the genetic advantages? And while there's not a lot of screen time, they express this arc beautifully with the symbol of the swim. The brothers, they used to swim out in the lake playing chicken with who would turn back first. Vincent lost every time. Only once did he win, and that was the day he moved out and made everything possible. So the pinnacle for Anton comes with the revelation when he challenges Vincent to a swim one more time and loses. That's when he learns why, even with all of his advantages, he only came in second place. Sound familiar?
You want to know how I did it? This is how I did it, Anton. I never saved anything for the swim back.
Grit, the human spirit. Just wanting it more than the next guy. Vincent realizes that the system is dampening his potential and becomes a better person for it. And that's what Anton sees. I'm actually surprised. This is one of the few movies that I can't get enough of, that has no gratuitous nudity and maybe 3 punches throughout the entire movie. It's impressive. Now, this movie lives and dies by its setups and its payoffs. I've touched on them before, but the biggest example is the swim. Vincent and Anton have a contest. They swim out the lake to see who chickens out first. Anton is bigger, Anton is stronger, Anton is genetically perfected Vincent. He always wins, until once. Anton almost drowns and Vincent saves him. Anton was trying to beat his brother down until he accepts the system. Vincent is trying to understand how to thrive in a world designed to discriminate against him. The payoff comes at the end of the movie when Vincent confronts Anton. Anton knows he's not a murderer, but still tries to convince him to turn himself in for genetic fraud. The swim pays off when Anton gets beat again, but doesn't know why. Why doesn't the world work as he said it would? Why did his parents alter his genes just to come in second place? And it was because Vincent wanted it better. He didn't save anything for the swim back. Setup, payoff. Which ties into a whole series of payoffs from the other cast. Like, everybody who grew as a character was because of Vincent Dream and his tenacity, and they gave him something for the swim back as their payoff. Irene gave him a reason to keep going, gave him a reason to want to come back. He's never had anything on Earth to live for. He gave her a dream, she gave him a reason to come back. Jerome, same thing. He leaves Vincent enough genetic samples for the rest of his life. He gives him something for the swim back. And Dr. Lamar, the final drug test was new. No one knew about it. Vincent wasn't ready for it, and he would have failed. And the whole thing would have been over. The doc fakes his drug test so he passes. Lamar was given hope for his children's future, and he gave Vincent something for the swim back. And so the final character revelation for Vincent was learning that he wasn't alone. He was alone this whole time. He wanted to go to space. He had to work hard, but he found out that he needed to know he wasn't alone. He inspired the people around him to be better, and they help him carry their dreams. And as a small symbol throughout the movie is about this second place. Jerome has his second place medal, showing his crisis of faith in a system when he was designed to be the best but just couldn't perform. Vincent losing the swim against his brother that he was designed to be superior to. He came in second place. If you were ever somebody who was told how smart he was the entire life, only to be outdone by others, this is the symbol that probably resonates with you. The symbol for Gattaca is identity. Even the Gattaca, G-A-T-A, genetic markers, identity markers. And everybody attached their identity to the infallibility of science and genetics, but it only killed what made people human in the first place. Your dreams, your grit, your tenacity, the ability to achieve. So I love the plot. It's such great storytelling. It starts with the premise of the movie. People can genetically alter their children to be the best of them, no faults, etc. Vincent parents want to do a natural birth because they don't have faith in the science. After the doctors declare their son dead in his 30s, they are coerced into altering their next son to be the best. Now, I could mention a reference to any social pressure surrounding an mRNA treatment during a global manufactured medical crisis, but I think you get it. Then they establish how genetically he's better. He gets taller sooner, he gets stronger, he gets smarter. Vincent is beaten down by his brother and by his parents. And then they have that moment about the swim I talked about earlier, and he leaves home to go find his way. Now, since he finds his parents were right, he can't do anything better than be a janitor at the Gattaca Space Corp, no matter how much he studies, trains, etc. He memorized orbital mathematics and rocket science. He trained as hard as fucking Batman, but he always fails the DNA test. So he leans into the black market and meets Jerome. Jerome gives him DNA samples, and Vincent gives him a lifestyle, and now the movie starts. A trip to Titan's planned. Vincent is the star employee scheduled to go when the director who tried to cancel the project turns up murdered. When the cops sweep the scene, Small aside, I love how they're called Hoovers in here, like in the 1940s when feds were called Hoovers because of J. Edgar. But in this movie, it's because the police work is essentially vacuuming up DNA and checking against violent tendencies. So now Vincent has to avoid getting caught by the cops. Irene almost catches him because chicks love to snoop. She steals his DNA, runs a check. Luckily, he leaves samples of Jerome and cleans up his own, so he keeps up the facade. The movie then devolves into a series of obstacles that try and prevent Vincent from getting into space. Having to fake a blood test at the clinic by pretending Lamar nicked an artery and swapping some blood vials. Leaving a dinner party date with Irene to avoid a second intravenous blood test, having to punch out a cop to escape detection, having to avoid police check stops, like who checks for contact lenses, which are common ways invalids fake their identity, by taking them out on a date, having to run across traffic when he can't see to keep Irene from discovering a secret, Jerome having to pretend he's Vincent to convince Anton that he's not a murderer, while Irene has to pretend she's actually dating him and not Vincent, and Lamar having to fake the drug test so that he can get into space, and afterwards, Vincent falling in love with Irene, who realizes her own heart condition isn't what's holding her back, but it's her faith in the system. Also, making peace with his brother after finding out the reason he wasn't the best was because the system failed him. By telling him he was better, it crushed his spirit, his ability to drive. Jerome killing himself in an incinerator after realizing his best life accomplishment was the enablement of Vincent's dreams, and the system he believed in was a lie. The winner is whoever wants it. It's either the peak of action films, the peak of sci-fi crime thrillers, the peak of sci-fi character studies, the peak of Star Trek, the peak of Hong Kong action, but this one really flies above its genre. Like, it's the peak on sci-fi drama thriller, but it's really the peak of storytelling. And nobody will admit this, but any man who's being honest will tell you that your eyes will well up when Lamar tells Vincent how to hold his dick when he's pissing. He sees the death of Jerome with a sad reverence. He sees his own wasted potential in Anton swimming naked in a lake. It's the most masculine themes a movie could have, and it doesn't use tits or guns or lasers or science to get there. So if you watch this, you'll truly see why I shit on Disney for putting sad music and making characters cry and then expecting that to be emotionally resonant. Like, this cocksucker is emotionally resonant. Their slop is garbage. Unless you're a sociopath. In that case, I got nothing for you. So there was a brief period in history. A lost generation forced to be better. A man that came out of nowhere and dropped hit after hit. Oh yeah, so there was this, there was The Truman Show, there was In Time. Like, if you look at his thing here, he's pretty good. A story of the problems of today wrapped up in the setting of tomorrow. Amazing character development. Resonant symbols. Symbols that make you want to be a better person. Insanely stylized but tasteful and realistic retrofuturism. It's the best of man. It's better than science. It's better than faith. You will watch this and not save anything for the ride back. And enjoy it because I damn well did. Cheers, fellas.